Hello everybody, welcome once again to another edition of the Little Farmer's Farm with myself, Guru Mafinda. It's been James's 7th birthday today, so if you look at the upload previously, if there is an upload, you'll see that he's been having a joint birthday party with his friend, who's the flower girl on the channel, Isabel, and they've had a wonderful time. It was a themed party. The theme was creepy crawlies, lizards, snakes and reptiles, and so we had a lot of snakes, lizards, reptiles, tortoises. There was a tarantula that was as big as your hand on it, so that was good. That was really good. It's also been a clash today with the annual fete, the allotment fete, down at these plots, and so unfortunately we had to do the party. It was exactly the same time as the party, which was really bad because we wanted to go to both, me and the little farmer, but unfortunately there was no way out of it. But no, we had a great time, and we came down in the morning before the party and we saw Pat and some of the other committee people while they were setting up the stalls and getting the barbecue ready and everything. And so we dropped off a couple of things for the tombola, and also we bought a set of raffle tickets. So we got five raffle tickets for £1. And Pat said, well, if you win, it's a first come first serve, so you can pick what you want, and as they get drawn out, you can pick what you want. And it was there was signed photographs of the two hairy bikers. Rick Stein, he had a signed photograph there. And Alan Titchmarsh. Guess who won? Alan Titchmarsh. What do you think, Alan? Rubbish! So, yeah, I won Alan Titchmarsh. Alan Titchmarsh signed photograph of Alan. Now, Alan's obviously going to go, not for any kitsch kind of a reason, but Alan's going to go pride of place in the Tiki Hut. He's going to be the mascot, I think, Alan, for the Tiki Hut. Tonight, what I want to do is I'm going to show you a bit of harvesting, and we're going to harvest a red cabbage, and we're going to harvest as well one of the round head cabbages. They've all hearted up nicely now, and they've been in for around about 4 months, coming up for 4 months. We put them in the ground in, I think it was May this year, end of May. We started them off about 3 weeks before that, so it would have been the beginning of May when they got a start, and they've been in for quite some time. They're quite large now, they're definitely ready for coming out. So we're going to take a couple of them and we're going to pickle them up, but that won't be this episode. We're going to preserve them. That'll be for another episode. But what I'll do is I'll talk you through what amendments we put into the soil, how we prepared the soil for them, and obviously you'll see the results that we got from them, because we did quite well with them, to be honest. So yeah, I'll leave you with Alan until the next segment. Get on with it, you numpty! Yeah, so we're going to be taking him out, and also him. And because I've not got my secateurs with me or a knife, I'm going to be using that to cut them out with. Get on with it! So yeah, that's what we've got from the two cabbages. Now I will put into the description below the specific variety of both of those cabbage, so that you've got the full gist of it. But as I say, we put them in the ground probably around about I think we started them off about 12 weeks ago, and we put them in the ground about 9 weeks ago, when the plants had grown to about 6 or 7 inches in height. And we planted them fairly close together, and we actually planted quite a few because we had loads. We had, out of the 24 starts that we did, in 4 trays of 6, the sort of 6 size, which is about that. They're about 2 or 3 inches, I think. And we had 6 in each, and out of the 24 that we had as starts, we actually got 19 of them to grow to 7 or 8 inches in height. And when they've got like sort of 6 or 7 leaves on them, the true leaves are out. We left them about another week before we planted them in. Not saying that's exactly the correct thing to do, but that's what we did. So it was about 3 or 4 weeks in. Sorry, I'm telling lies, mate. It was 4 weeks from sowing them to them being of the right size that we could plant them out, which was about 6 or 7 inches with true leaves on them. And we planted them in. And since then, they've come on leaps and bounds, but the soil was prepared for them before we planted them. Now, cabbage is like a fairly alkali soil, so they need to be around about, the 6.2 to 6.8 on the pH. They don't like acidity very much. So what we did do is we put in some garden lime into the soil. I'll just take you up to the beds now and talk you through exactly what we actually put into the beds before we put the cabbages in there. Yeah, so this is where the cabbages have just been taken from. The red cabbage was taken from that location. Right there, and I think you can still see the end of his stem there. So that was taken from there, and in there we put quite a lot of looseness. Now they do say they like a firm soil, but in this instance they came on leaps and bounds without it, but they did grow sort of along. They didn't have a firm base to them and come out really as they should have done because of the looseness of the soil, and that's because I put plenty of perlite in it. So that's about 50% topsoil. I would say about 40% just your standard compost, your verve. Into that we did put quite a lot of bloodfish and bone. We put a couple of bags of perlite. Now this is a 6 foot by 4 foot bed, this particular one. So there was a couple of bags, I think, of perlite that was thrown in there. It's 8 inches deep. So not very deep at all, but it is open to the earth underneath. We didn't line it out with anything. Now there was good earth underneath this, which we'd weeded previously before we put the beds in. But we do tend to get horse's tail coming up and things like that, so we kept on top of the weeding while we were going with this. As I say, we've had, I would say, for each metre square by 8 inch deep in here, I'm getting it all to cock. Each 2 foot square by 8 inches deep, there's probably a handful of bloodfish and bone, a handful of organic chicken manure, and probably a good handful as well of the perlite thrown in with the verve compost to 40%-ish or 45-ish. If we say roughly 50-50 actually, verve compost and topsoil, that was the mix. So that was the mix that we had in there. Now, the cabbages that we've got growing out of it have been of a good quality, but these were the second set of cabbages that we put in. The first set were put in April, at the back end of April, probably about April the 20th. And so yeah, they were put in then. They were started at the end of May. At the end of March. They were started probably the last week, I think, of March, and they were put into the soil about the 20th of April, and they were fine, nothing wrong with them, until about 2 or 3 weeks later. And we'd started the other ones off as the first lot were put in. So anyway, about 3 weeks later, noticed that they'd been decimated by cabbage whites, and that was all before the netting was completed around these beds. So my advice to you guys, if you are starting out, is before you actually plant anything in the beds, make sure that they're bug tight and that the butterflies can't get in and the insects can't get in to eat your crops, because they will get in and they'll eat them. So yeah, net up as best as you can. Make sure that the soil's good. This soil's too loose really, it should be a lot firmer, to be honest, but they've done alright. The plants are doing fine in here. They're just getting a bit, some of them are getting a little bit leggy because they're a bit overplanted in here as well. So these are lessons that we're learning. Some have done better than others. As you can see, this has gone up and it's very stalky, so it's very tall. So as that starts getting swelled at the top, it'll tipple over. Now it's come up pretty straight, that stalk, but it has come up high in the sky, and they're all more or less doing the same thing. Over there, as you can see, there was decimation by those bugs, the cabbage whites, the caterpillars. So some have survived and some haven't. We did a bug pick in there, a good bug pick in there, got rid of a lot of caterpillars out of it, but it's a constant battle. Get it all netted up as soon as you possibly can. That's the advice I give to you, and then you won't get half the devastation that we got. So next year, that's the lesson that we're going to have learned from this year's efforts. As you can see, the damage that those bugs did. There's still plants to harvest, but they have been very much shot at in there. One that I did net up from the start was this baby, and if you look at him, apart from that one that the slugs I think have been at, he's in good nick, and I'm going to leave him to grow on. I've taken a lot of the outer leaves from around that actually, and the reason for that is that we had lettuce interplanted around those, and it was shading out the lettuce, and we took those out because it had grown to a size that I wanted anyway. So I took all the outer leaves out that were getting a bit yellowed and rotted, cleared them out, left the lettuce for another week, managed to harvest most of it, and then some of it bolted. But that's what happens, you know. You plant enough so that you can sacrifice some of it, but you do your best to make sure you don't have to sacrifice any of it. Keep it as protected as you possibly can from the bugs, and you won't get too many dramas. So yeah, I'll go and take another look now back at the cabbages, because they've been aesthetically arranged, and I'll show you the comparison. I'll put my hand at the side of them. I've not got particularly massive hands, but they're a good size. They're a standard bloke's hand size, maybe a little bit bigger. And you can see visually